Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We'll be right back with today's podcast guest. First, I want to shout out to our partners, We Coach, the global community of women in high school sports, Florida Coaches Coalition, and Vital Signs Wall of Fame. Check out these four great organizations, add them to your network, and now don't hit that fast forward button. Please take a listen to our podcast sponsor messages. They're all great products, and it only takes 3 minutes. Thanks for listening. Here we go. We want to thank our good friends at Snap Mobile for their support of the podcast. Go to snapraise.com. Check out their entire suite of platforms designed to help you as an athletic director do your job better. Snap Raise is their fundraising platform. They've helped schools just like yours raise over $700 million. Our coaches and our parents just loved it. And here's a really cool feature. They'll even give you your money before you actually start your fundraiser. I don't think anybody else does that. Go to snapraise.com. Check it out today. That's snapraise.com. We also want to say thank you to Wall of Fame by Vital Signs. You know, they're on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. The Wall of Fame is an interactive touchscreen video console that's going to highlight your school's top performers, both past and present, in athletics, academics, and the arts. But it's so much more than that. The Wall of Fame is also an extensive content program that helps you tell more compelling stories that'll better engage your audience. Go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Check out their great products, and when you're ready to buy, use the link vitalsignswalloffame.com/Jake. You'll get a nice discount. That's Vital Signs Wall of Fame. We also want to thank Gipper. Go to Gipper.com. See how athletic directors are creating world-class marketing content for their school's social media channel. Use our podcast code ADPOD10. You'll get 10% off. Create custom content for your school's social media channel. Go to Gipper.com. We want to thank Huddle for their support. Go to Huddle.com and change the way you see the game. As an AD, I made sure our school was a Huddle school, and the tools that they provided our teams, our coaches, and our athletes were a professional grade solution to the challenges that we all face as ADs. Go to Huddle.com, see why we believe in sports and teams believe in Huddle. Join the 6 million users. Turn your school into a Huddle school. We also want to say thanks to Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. Go to hometownticketing.com. They're going to show you how to set up and sell tickets online for all of your events, athletics, academics, arts, you name it, even graduation. And the best part, every step of the way, you'll have a dedicated client success manager providing hands-on support. That's every step of the way. Go to hometownticketing.com and get started today. Simple and easy online ticketing. We want to say thanks to Sideline Interactive, indoor scoring tables and video boards. SidelineInteractive.com right now. Schedule a live web demo and see their tables and their scoreboards in action. Their products not only generate income for your department, they also create the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. One of the best purchases I ever made was a Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Go to SidelineInteractive.com right now. Schedule that live web demo. And we want to say thanks to Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Athletic surveys are a quick, easy way for you to collect comprehensive data that allows you to evaluate and improve your entire program. ADs usually only hear back from that 2%, the squeaky wheel parent or the frustrated student athlete. And we need to hear back from them. But Athletic Surveys connects you with the other 98% that really love and support your program. And that's a tremendously valuable tool to have when you're meeting with that squeaky wheel parent or your school board or your principal. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They'll create a custom survey that lets you take the pulse of your parents and your student athletes. That's athleticsurveys.com. Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. We have a very cool guest today. Dare I say, a legend in the world of educational athletic administration. Our guest today is Jeff Sitz. Jeff is a certified master athletic administrator If you're not familiar with Jeff, let me give you just a brief introduction. He's a longtime athletic director, 40 years at Wisconsin Lutheran High School. He's also a past president of our national association, the NIAAA, and he's staying busy now. He's the associate executive director for the Wisconsin Athletic Directors Association, still very active in the profession, and he's taken some time to be with us today. Jeff, thanks for coming on the Educational AD podcast.
Well, Jake, thanks for having me. This is a treat for sure. So thanks for hanging in there and being persistent with me. I appreciate it.
Again, you and I talked a little bit before we started recording. It's springtime in Florida and Wisconsin. Those weather patterns are a little bit different sometimes, but let's go ahead and jump right into it. We always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us that biographical sketch where you grew up, maybe take us up through the high school and college years, and then we'll take a break and hear more about your early career. But what's the Jeff Sitz origin story?
So I'm born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin here. Ben, you mentioned I was at Wisconsin Lutheran High School as athletic director, and I've been there all my life. My dad started teaching there in 1949, and so I was born in 56. So I've been there all my life, and went to high school there, graduated in 1974, and found my way back there pretty quickly. And we'll maybe get into that a little bit later. But found my way back there to teach and coach and do the athletic director stuff. So born and raised here in Milwaukee, and have been kind of at Wisconsin Lutheran my whole life. Was a 3-sport athlete there. I kind of played football, I kind of played basketball, and track and field was my thing. So that's where I got a little bit more action and playing time. I was a quarterback on the football team until they discovered there were other kids in school that were much better. And then they moved me out to wide receiver because I could run a little bit. And basketball was, I think I was a good athlete, and that's about where that ended. I went to, after high school, I went to the University of Wisconsin Parkside, which was an NIAAA school at the time, kind of a Division II level back in the late 70s, early 80s. And I went there on a track and field scholarship, and was a long jumper, and they made me try a couple of decathlons, and I think my coach, Bob Lawson, thought that this was going to be a really good idea. I wasn't very flexible, so the hurdles were an issue, Jake, and pole vaulting, he just told me, just run and hang on to the pole until you get over 11 feet, you'll be okay. So, that was the extent. I think I ran 2 decathlons before he gave up on that effort, but I kept long jumping. Was fortunate enough, I placed a couple of times at the indoor national meet and made the finals twice at the outdoor meet. And so, really had a great time in college. It was a great experience. Bob Lawson was a guy that I never knew as a track coach, and he really didn't recruit me that much, even though I had been a state champion in the high school level. But Bob Lawson had been a decathlete at USC. And so he was just into track and field, and he knew everything about everything. And I mean, we had race walkers in the NIAAA and all that kind of stuff. So we had a pretty successful team. He was a very good coach, and learned a lot. So that was really one of the things, though, that's set up. And I'm just going to set this up for later. One of the things at Parkside is they had no indoor facility. They had a nice outdoor track, but they had no indoor facility. So we would go to the local high schools, Racine Case, Racine Park, and use their indoor facility when they were finished. And got to know the high school coaches, a guy by the name of Bill Greiten, who was an excellent coach in this area for a long time. And Bill said to me one day, he said, if you ever want to go into coaching, he said, I know a guy. He said, I can get you a graduate assistantship down at Eastern Kentucky University. And I thought, well, okay, never heard of Eastern Kentucky University. And I said, I got to work for a year and get some money, but, be interested in that some way down the road. And so a little bit later in life, that came into play. So that was really an interesting experience that I had, and all based on my, track and field abilities, I guess, and went to Parkside and had a great time there.
Boy, I knew that, you and I are about the same age. You're a little bit, tiny bit older than me, but Very similar background, high school. And then I went to Pacific University, which was an NIAAA school at the time out in Oregon. And we knew about Wisconsin Parkside. We'd see those performances. So I'm sure I saw your name on a top 20 national list back then. Kind of funny. I was a hurdler, and my coach did the same thing, put you in the decathlon. He called me a pole rider instead of a pole vaulter. So I very much know where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Let's go back a little bit before that to your high school days. You and I are from an era where
Mhm.
that's what you did. You did three sports, or at least
Right.
two sports, and the pendulum, swung in another direction. Hopefully now it's swinging back. Um, how do you feel? Well, let me put it this way. I think our teaching and coaching careers are probably similar too. I was at private schools for much of my career, and we always encouraged our kids to do multiple sports. I'm going to guess you did the same thing, at Wisconsin Lutheran. Um, how did you approach that with coaches, kids, maybe parents about the benefits of the three sport or multi-sport experience?
When I was a high school athlete, it just was kind of the norm, as you said. I mean, you and your buddies just you went out for football, and then you ran cross country and whatever. And then in the winter, it was just like, well, are you going to at our school, are you going to wrestle or are you going to play basketball?
Exactly.
Which one of the two are you going to do? Because you're going to do something. And then track would come around in the spring, and baseball and tennis and all those various other things, and it was just kind of the norm. And I think that man, I can't remember too many friends who weren't at least involved in two sports, right? But that was a different era. I think nowadays, what we would try to do is just show that how, okay, if you're going to play football, and we had a very successful football program at Wisconsin Lutheran for many years, and in the early 2000s. And, it was like, of course you're going out for track, because this is how track, while you're still going to the weight room every day and all those kinds of things, we can make accommodations, but, this is how it's going to impact your football career. And we'd have football coaches saying to the kids, yeah, why aren't you going out for track? We want you to. And in a parochial school like ours, we often had coaches who were coaching multiple sports, right? And so they were coaching football and track. They were an assistant track coach, and that was a great draw for them. Or maybe one of the line coaches in football was coaching wrestling, and so he would drag some kids along with him. We had a harder time, I think, with the young ladies, getting them out for a second sport. That lure of club volleyball is always a difficult one, and still is. I mean, we go to the track meet just the other day here, and well, where's Rachel and where's Susie? Well, they got club volleyball today. And, so early in the season, the coaches give them a little slack. Later in the season, it gets, the noose gets tightened a little bit to show up at the high school events and track meet. But I think there has to be good cooperation. There's so many opportunities and so many, things that the kids can do these days. It's hard to keep them motivated and going. But I don't know of a college coach who's telling the kids, don't be involved in more than one sport. It's just not healthy. I remember one quick story, Jake. My wife used to be our volleyball coach at our place, and probably the very first really talented volleyball player she had come through the system. She had been playing volleyball since she was 6 years old, and her mom was a club coach, and she was always playing 2 levels up. She was outstanding. She was a setter, so really dynamic. She graduated from our place. She went to Minnesota State and played volleyball on a Division II scholarship, and she quit after the first year. And she said, I've been playing volleyball all year round, all the time, never played any other sports. I think she ran track 1 year in high school, and then found out that didn't mesh with volleyball, club volleyball. But she had just had it by the time she was a freshman in college. She just didn't want to see a volleyball again. And that was a sad situation. And I think she wished she would have diversified a little bit over her career.
Boy, that really hits home. You hear that so often. We had very similar situation at our school. This gal's, national recruit. We were a small school, so obviously she was a dominant player. Great kid. And her senior year, she came out for track, and she said, "Gosh, I wish I would have been doing this forever. I've never had so much fun as I had this year. She was high jumping, she was hurdling. I mean, it would have been a great, pentathlete.
Yeah.
But she was same thing. Said, I'm done with volleyball. I'm not going to play. And so you just hate to see that happen. So,
Jake, I think the other thing that I noticed too is, we've got a good basketball program at our school right now. It's very, very excellent. And we've had kids, who want to play collegiate basketball. And we keep saying to some of them, look, at best, you're going to be a division, if you can find a Division II school who's going to recruit you, that's great. And if you want to play there, that's fine. But your idea of being a Division I player and going to the NBA someday, you could actually get a Division I scholarship in track as a triple jumper, high jumper, whatever, because of the abilities that you have. You just have to put the same kind of dedication and training in here that you do on the basketball floor. And sometimes kids are kind of blind to that idea.
Yeah, again, this will sound like the get off my porch guy, but when you and I were in high school, our coaches, I think, had our best interest in heart. And nowadays there's too many people with that title coach that it's more about the club and more about them than the kids. So I'll step down off my soapbox now because, this is your interview. For our listeners, our guest today is Jeff Sitz, longtime athletic director at Wisconsin Lutheran High School, NIAAA past president, and currently the associate executive director for the Wisconsin Athletic Directors Association. We're going to take our first break, but we'll be back with some more. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thank you to Snap Mobile for their support of the podcast. Go to snapraise.com and check out their entire suite of platforms designed to help you as an athletic director do your job better. You've got Snap Connect, Snap Store, Snap Manage, and Snap Raise, which is their fundraising platform. We used it at our school with great success, and you can too. They even have a program where they'll give you your money before you actually start your fundraiser. I don't think anybody else does that. Go to snapraise.com. Check out that entire suite of platforms today, snapraise.com. We also want to thank Vital Signs Wall of Fame. They're on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. The Wall of Fame is actually an interactive touchscreen video console that's going to highlight your school's top performers in athletics, academics, and the arts, but it's so much more than that. The Wall of Fame is also an extensive content program that helps you tell more compelling stories to better engage your audience. Go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Check out their great products, and when you're ready to buy, use the link vitalsignswalloffame.com/Jake and get a nice discount. Vital Signs Wall of Fame. Let them help you bring your school's legacy to life. Hey, welcome back, everyone. Our guest again is Jeff Sitz. He's a certified master athletic administrator, currently the associate executive director for the Wisconsin AD Association. Jeff, before we get started on our next segment, you mentioned you had a track and field story, and as a track guy, I got to hear it.
So, when I was after going, I had mentioned Bill Greiton before, and he said, I know a guy, Art Harvey at Eastern Kentucky University, said a word from me, and he said, you'll get that graduate assistantship. And I said, well, that's great. So worked for a year, got a little bit of money, and I went down there to Eastern Kentucky, was really looking forward to it. And literally 10 days before I left, I got a telephone call from Art Harvey, and he said, I'm no longer the track coach here at Eastern Kentucky. He said, I've taken a job as a vice president at the university in the admissions department, but he said, your graduate assistantship is still good. Well, the big deal with Art Harvey was that he had every single graduate assistant that he had ever had at Eastern, he placed in a Division I school the next year. Grover Hinsdale, who ended up being the head coach at Georgia Tech, was the guy before me. And so I was just looking forward to that because that's exactly what I wanted to do, coach at the collegiate level. Well, Art Harvey's now no longer the track coach, and they brought in Rick Erdman. Now, Rick, I don't know how many Eastern championships he won at Eastern Kentucky in the various conferences they were in. He just retired a few years ago, but I ended up being the cross-country coach for the first month and a half of the season because they had hired him out of Hagerstown Junior College, but he hadn't moved down there yet. And then when he came down, he was kind of like Rick Majerus. He was living in a hotel for a while, and while he sold his house and so on and so forth. So, it kind of came to the end of my career there, right? My 18 months on campus, got my master's degree, and Rick Erdman was really a huge figure at Eastern over the years. But in that first session, he just didn't know people in that part of the country. And so, I was sending out, resumes, but they were kind of, I'm sure, finding the file at the bottom of the wastebasket, because there wasn't much behind them at that point in time. So I kind of came to the end of that, getting my master's degree, and kind of had nowhere to go.
Wow. Again, as a track guy, those names are familiar to me. So I do appreciate you sharing. Let's go and talk about your early career. You mentioned that you spent most of your life as a student and then as a teacher coach at Wisconsin Lutheran. How'd you end up back there? And maybe talk a little bit about those early days and the transition from teaching and coaching to, as I say, sitting on the other side of the desk.
Right. Well, so during that whole transition down at Eastern Kentucky, my wife, who was going to school in Minnesota at the time, we were getting married. So I took a weekend off of studying, getting my master's degree, and ran back home, and we got married here in Milwaukee, and then went back down to Richmond, Kentucky to finish up my summer session there. And two of the guys who had been at our wedding gave me a call one day and said, "Hey, Jeff, what are you doing next year?" And I said, "Well, right now I don't really have anything. I got resumes out there, but it's getting close to the start of the year and everything else." And he said, "Well, they had been at Wisconsin Lutheran High School as teachers, and then they had gone out to the Tacoma, Washington area and started a little school called Evergreen Lutheran, and they were looking for help there." And so, hang on to your hats here. My wife and I went out there as the girls' dormitory supervisors. And so I was, I usually leave the part out where my wife was involved too. I just say, well, I was the girls' dormitory supervisor, and then people gasp like people did when I was out there. And, but anyway, my wife and I were the dormitory supervisors. She was a kindergarten teacher at a local church school, and I taught at the high school, and, I helped out coaching, basketball. And I helped out, I started their track and field program out there. Now that was a really tiny school. So we stayed there for 1 year, Jake. My dad's health was not real good back here in Wisconsin. And I kind of knew how Wisconsin Lutheran worked. And it was always, well, how many students do we have this year? And what, how many sections of this, that, and the other thing are uncovered heading into the first day of school. So we kind of came back to Milwaukee here on a little bit of a whim. My wife got a teaching job right away, and I got hired on at Wisconsin Lutheran. And I always say it was kind of pay-per-view. So they paid me X number of dollars for every class I taught. And I think I was teaching geography and English. My dad had been the chairman of the English department. I think they figured it rubbed off on me. It really didn't, but I was teaching some English. And, and I would, teach whatever they needed me to teach. And I was coaching 3 sports. So I was the freshman football coach, I was the freshman girls basketball coach, and I was assisting in track for 1 or 2 years before I took that over all the way. So I did that for 2 or 3 years. And then my wife and I were at the state fair here just a couple blocks away in Wisconsin. And the business manager came up and congratulated me on being the assistant athletic director. And I said, "Cliff, I don't know what you're talking about." And he said, "Oh, hasn't Pastor Krause talked to you yet?" I said, "No." I said, "Nobody's talked to me." And he said, "Well, he said, act surprised when they tell you, but you're going to be the assistant athletic director." So I served as an assistant to a longtime athletic director here, Glenn Roche. And after that was done, then the position was mine. So in '84, I started as the athletic director at Wisconsin Lutheran. And I walked out of the building on, I didn't walk out on July 1st, but my tenure was up on July 1st. We have had a building project going on here at our school outdoor athletic facility. So they hired me on through the end of that. And so I think my last day in the building was November 1st. But so it was a long run, very enjoyable. Lots of different iterations of what athletic director meant during those years. It was teaching almost full time for a while, and then they cut down and, cut down to one sport and then no sports and so on and so forth. So it's that was kind of the early days and getting going.
One of the questions I always ask in this situation is, obviously technology has, had a big hand in how the job of an AD has changed over the years. I was in education for 41 years, but only 25 as an athletic director. What are some of the changes that you saw, and let's zero in that focus at your school over those 40 years, separate from technology? What are some of the changes, both good and maybe, not so good that you saw during that time?
Jake, as a track coach and athletic director in the early days, one of the things that I remember, bigger to me than the internet, and I'm sure in the big picture, the internet was much more important. I remember when our school got a fax machine. And the fax machine was so awesome for a track coach because you didn't have to figure out your track lineup a week and a half ahead of time so that you could get it in the mail a week ahead of time so that the other school could grab it and do all those kinds of things. And that just made such a difference to me. It was such a time saver, even as athletic director, because they didn't have to spend so much time as they had track, girls and boys track and field coach, getting lineups in and out and all those kinds of things. But yeah, I was in a situation where my school, I did not have an administrative assistant. So even, when I was teaching, I didn't have an administrative assistant. Now, some of the other secretaries in the school would help out here and there if I really ran into an issue. But I convinced them last year. I said, really to transition to someone who's brand new coming into our school, and it was clear that the position was not going to go to anybody within our building. I said, we need to hire an administrative assistant that I can train so that the new athletic director will have someone to go to with just basic questions. And so I did have a part-time administrative assistant in my 38th and final year as athletic director. But other than that, it was pretty different. But so technology, I was on a computer looking at a screen like this all day long. And, the computers, obviously, and the internet and the software, and people who are helping sponsor your program, right? The software is just incredible in what it can do and the time saving that it is. It's awesome. Social media could probably go away as far as I'm concerned with the way kids' mental health and all those things and the issues and problems they cause, just getting ready for a game and so on and so forth. I just saw the other night, and the Bucks and the Heat are playing, right? And Tyler Hero is a local kid and he played in our conference. And I just remember it was a sellout when he came and played at our school and it was kind of a free for all. And he had just decommitted or from Wisconsin and was, going elsewhere. And it was just a crazy night, and all the social media stuff flying around was just absolutely insane. And I thought, man, this isn't even basketball anymore. This is like a social free for all. So I hate to see that happen, but I think that's so true nowadays. It's so tough, and kids are so caught up in that instant stuff and saying things that you shouldn't be saying, and it's easy to hide behind the screen and the phone and everything else. So, but those are probably bigger conversations, but it's kind of, I think, the downfall here, and I'm sure hopeful that we can kind of right the moral course, the moral compass that we have in our country again. Just no need for tearing each other down in those ways,
Yeah. You touch on a point, social media, and again, it's not right, wrong, good or bad. It's here. This is what it is. And, we're making it work. What I really miss, and again, I'm that old guy on the porch again. Back in our day, I'm sure it was the same for you. You're maybe 9, 10, 11 years old, and you see those high school kids, you go to those high school games. And I remember thinking, boy, I can't wait to put on that uniform, and even wondering, am I ever going to be big enough, to play high school or even, wouldn't even think in college. And now so many kids, I'm not going to say everybody, but so many kids, it's about my reps or my playing time or, my role. and transfer portal and everything else. So again, a lot different than when you and I were lacing them up back in the day. Okay.
For sure.
Well, we're going to take another quick break again for our listeners. Our guest today is Jeff Sitz. He is a retired athletic director, but still very active as the associate executive director for the Wisconsin Athletic Directors Association, also a past president of the NIAAA. Let's go and take that break, but we'll be right back. This is the Educational AD Podcast. Hey, we want to say thank you to Gipper for their support of the podcast. Go to Gipper.com and see how athletic directors are creating world-class content for their school's social media channel. You can do it in seconds on any device, and you don't need any design experience. Go to Gipper.com, use our code ADPOD10, and you'll get 10% off. Start creating custom content for your school's social media channel. That's Gipper.com. Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. Jeff, one of the segments that I really enjoy listening to is our next one, where I ask you to share some of the mentors that you've had during your life. None of us get to where we're at on our own. So who are some of the people that helped you along the way?
I thought I was thinking of this the other day, and I mean, you always hate to start mentioning people because you're going to forget somebody, right? Somebody that was key, and it's like, oh my goodness, how could I have forgotten them? I think back to some of my high school coaches, a guy by the name of Gary Reinke. We weren't the most successful program in the state by far back in those days, but he just had a mission of he would always say, I want to make Christian young men out of little Lutheran boys. And, he toughened us up and he just made us go beyond where we thought we could go. And I knew Gary personally as well. And, he coached football for me after I became athletic director. He was still coaching for a while. And, he's just a guy that stands out. My college track coach, Bob Lawson, like I say, Bob didn't have the greatest social skills in the world, but oh my goodness, did he know track and field? I mean, we had race walkers and we had marathoners and we had, everything all over the place. And, he could pick apart a javelin throw and he could pick apart a vault, and he just was great with that. I just, had a lot of respect for his knowledge and so on. In the AD world, once I got going in the state of Wisconsin a bit, I joined right away in 1984, 1985 and joined WADA. And because we're a dual state, I was involved in the NIAAA as well. One person that really pushed me to get into the leadership was Barb Deichel. Barb had been past president of WADA, and Barb served on some NIAAA committees and whatnot. And Barb was really influential in pushing me. And every year she would say, Jeff, you are going to run for president of WADA. She said, you're going to do this. And she said, we got to get you on the board. And I had served on the board as a private school representative back when we had one of those. State of Wisconsin wasn't really fully, didn't have private schools in the state association until 2000. And so, Barb was very instrumental in pushing me to get involved in leadership. Guy by the name of Don Tolkach. Don had been a number of different high schools in Wisconsin, private and public. And, Don was and still is a great influence. Just 2 weeks ago, a bunch of retired ADs and current ADs went up to Lambeau Field. Don gives tours at Lambeau Field, and it was his last day. So we went up there and surprised him a little bit with, about 20 of us former athletic directors going on his final tour at Lambeau Field. From a distance, John Olson, Jim Teff, guys who are legends in the NIAAA and were certainly legends here in Wisconsin. I was currently coaching in the same conference with Jim Teff that Jim Teff was at when he was at South Milwaukee High School. Peggy Seeger Brown, who's currently on the awards committee for the NIAAA, and she's at Divine Savior Holy Angels here in Milwaukee. Peggy is so much better an athletic director than I am, and I just admire her. And she's always willing to share and give ideas, and she's always been a positive pusher for doing things the right way, and I really respect her. Sandy Freris, who was at the Prairie School, down in Racine before she retired and moved to a warm climate in Arizona. Sandy was terrific. And so, just a lot of people like that I just keep thinking, they were encouragers. They weren't about themselves, and they weren't about, what they were going to get out of it, but they wanted to encourage others. Greg Harvey was the president of WADA one year, and Greg Smith, who is currently our executive director here in Wisconsin, called me up and said, "Hey, can you serve? Would you be willing to serve in the NIAAA board? It's our turn to appoint someone." Those guys obviously were instrumental in me becoming involved in the NIAAA, other than just going to the national conference every year. So I've always appreciated them and their leadership, and I guess they saw something in me that maybe I didn't even see in myself at the time, quite honestly. So appreciated that. On the national level, I mean, I just, Lannis Robinson and Rich Barton and Doug Kilgore and Rich Burchard and Roy Turner. I teach 706 with Roy Turner, and Don Bales, Daryl Nance, Cheryl Stite. I mean, it just, you just go on and on, right, Jake? I mean, these people are bigger than life. And the thing that I've gotten to know about leaders and the people that I really look up to is that they're so willing to share. We're in a competitive arena. I mean, athletics is competitive, and you get in there as an athletic director, and all of a sudden you find out that these people are willing to share. They're willing to share what their handbook says about this, and they're willing to share how they deal with this, and they're willing to, chime in on, and it's like, wow. You would think that they would have a fence up around their school and say, no, you figure it out for yourself. But that just isn't the case. I mean, people are just willing to share and be genuine with you. And, of course, Mike Blackburn and Bruce Whitehead and now Phil Risen, those guys have just been, not only mentors, but friends. And those are the things that continue to amaze me, not only about the NIAAA, but WADA here at home in Wisconsin as well. I'm learning things all the time from athletic directors who weren't even born when I started as an athletic director. I mean, that's how old I am. I'm older than dirt, right? But you keep learning things from upcoming athletic directors. And I just, it's just a great profession. There are so many people. I probably could have named 100 more that have been influential, but those are some of the people that come to the top of my list.
Well, as you're going down that list, that was literally a who's who of, educational athletic directors, very cool. And even in Wisconsin, you mentioned, I think the last Wisconsin AD you mentioned was Peggy Siegert-Braun. I got to know Peggy initially through the virtual NIAAA conference, that year.
Right.
She ended up coming on the podcast, does a great job. So again, those connections that we make, and you're absolutely right about ADs sharing. As coaches, we would share a little bit, but you didn't want to share too much because you didn't want to get beat. But as ADs, you can't wait to share. Hey, have you tried this? Or have you heard about this great idea? So no, you're absolutely right about that. Okay.
Jake, probably one other person that I would mention is a former head of the WIAA was Doug Chickering. And Doug was forced with a really influential problem here in Wisconsin, because when private schools were in a separate state association, some legislator here in Wisconsin was going to bring a lawsuit against the WIAA, and, because they weren't including the parochial schools, the private schools. And he had the courage, as the director of the WIA. It wasn't a popular opinion or popular position at the time, but Sandy Freris and I think Peggy was on that committee too, along with superintendents and whatever from around the state, and they led a discussion. It was a 3-year discussion as to how do we incorporate private schools into the public schools here and have one WIAA, state association. And Doug Chickering was really instrumental in getting that done. And it took a lot of courage on his part. I'm sure he got a lot of flack that he never talked about, but that was another, it was just such a, I just sat back and watched him run that committee for those years. And, a tremendous example of leadership and how you deal with a difficult situation. That's this profession. I think you can learn if you have a short relationship with someone or a long-term relationship with someone, you learn from them. and you grow as an athletic director, and you take away from those experiences the things that are outstanding, and helps you grow as a person, as an athletic director, as an administrator. And you just have to look for that gem in every relationship that you come across.
No, absolutely. And when we get to our next segment where we share best practices, we're going to ask you to share some gems. And all those ADs you just mentioned, okay, now I'm going to hit you up for a favor. You need to shoot them an email and say, hey, reach out to Jake. Jake will get you on the podcast. So let's have them tell their stories and share their best practices too. Okay?
All right, will do.
For our listeners, we're visiting today with Jeff Sitz. He is a certified master athletic administrator, former NIAAA President, and currently the Associate Executive Director for the Wisconsin Athletic Directors Association. We're going to take another quick break, but we'll be back. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to Huddle for their support. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure our school was a Huddle school, and you should too. Go to huddle.com and change the way you see the game. Huddle's going to provide your teams, your coaches, your kids with the tools that they need to play at the highest level. It's going to be a professional grade solution to the challenges that we all face as athletic directors. At Huddle, we believe in sports and teams believe in Huddle. Join the 6 million users. Turn your school into a Huddle school. We also want to say thank you to Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. Go to hometownticketing.com. They're going to show you how to set up and sell tickets at your school for all your events, not just athletics, but things like school plays, dances, concerts, even graduation. And every step of the way, you're going to have a dedicated client success manager that's providing hands-on support. That's every step of the way. Go to hometownticketing.com and get started today. Hometown Ticketing, simple and easy online ticketing. Welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. Jeff, I'm going to put you on the spot right now. One of the things we try to do with this podcast is the idea of sharing best practices. So looking back at your 40 years at Wisconsin Lutheran, what are some things that you did with your teams, your coaches, your programs that you're particularly proud of that you would call a best practice you'd like to share?
There are a couple of things that have transpired at our school, and most of them were due to the coaches, right? I mean, one of the things that we teach in 706 is, don't hire coaches who are going to be problems. Hire coaches who are going to be problem solvers, right? And so here's a problem, and here's the solution. Here's what we can do to handle it. Just want to run that by you. And I was really blessed at Wisconsin Lutheran with a tremendous coaching staff. And they were really good. Two things, our football program years ago, like I say, right now we're a pretty good football program. Years ago, we were very good. I think we won 5 state championships in a matter of like 9 years. And so we had a really good football program going. And they started a program in our football coaches did called Reading Buddies. And so what they would do in the off season is they would take a couple of kids. We have a number of Lutheran grade schools, and that's where we get most of our kids here at Wisconsin Lutheran. And so the Reading Buddy kids would go out, and the football players in their uniform would sit down with the kindergartners or the first graders or second graders, and they would read them books. And, just get them excited about, I tell them a little bit about their school, but get them excited about reading. And, it was great for the grade school kids because they saw somebody from the high school coming in and talking to them. And, it was a big brother kind of a situation. But we saw tremendous growth for the young men who are involved. And again, all the credit goes to our football coaches for scheduling it and taking it and getting out and doing it. But, leadership development in those football players, giving back to the community. That was one thing I was always really proud of. We had some other programs who did similar things with our elementary schools. Of course, we had kids teaching in our summer camps all the time. We had a summer camp for just about everything. And so, kids would get involved in coaching, helping the coaches do the volleyball camp or the football camp or the whatever it might be. Now we have quite a junior Viking program at our school. That's been developed over the years and under really good leadership right now. Blair Shopper is the athletic director for that junior Viking program. And we have lots of our student athletes who are coaching in the off season and during the summer in those programs as well. Great community give back and really helps the leadership grow. That's one thing that we tried to emphasize at our school in a number of ways, and I see that all over the place. Our volleyball team does a teacher appreciation award that was really greatly received, and I got that out of the NIAAA. I got that out of the IAA manual, right, or the magazine when it came out. Somebody was doing it. I think it was in Kansas, and we thought, wow, what a great idea. We've honored hundreds of teachers, so the seniors would choose someone, and before a volleyball match near the middle of the season, then we would award them a plaque and talk a little bit about why they were, so special to the development of that young lady in the volleyball program. And that was really well received. I mean, the teachers loved it, the kids loved it, so that they could, we had one girl say, I wasn't going to go out for volleyball this year as a senior because I'm not going to play much, but I really wanted to honor Mrs. Schmidt. And so therefore I'm going to go out for volleyball so that I can be part of that presentation that night. I'm not sure that's great motivation, but it was pretty cool to hear that program meant something to them. And then the last one, Jake, that I had reached out to my boys track coach, Brian Gottschalk, and I had said, Brian, we need to have a leadership program going for our for our athletes. We need to have we can't just sit back and say, well, kids are going to develop as leaders. We've got to do something intentional to help them in that development. And so we started this program, and he just ran wild with it. Brian is an aggressive guy and awesome. And he ran with it, and he started the Viking Christian Leadership Program. And initially it was for athletes, captains of the team and so on and so forth. But it quickly grew after a couple of months into, well, let's do some development of younger kids who aren't on the varsity yet and are going to be leaders someday. So let's talk to the freshmen and JV coaches and find out who are the upcoming leaders in our program, and let's get them involved in this intentional program. After, I think, 18 months, the principal came to Brian and said, this is so successful, we've got to make it school-wide. And so the VCLA has become a leadership program for the arts and for kids in general, and whoever's on the step team or the dance team or the cheer team or the choir or whatever. And it encompasses hundreds of kids now, and really an intentional program. And again, it may have been Jeff Sitz saying, hey, we need to do something here, but the teachers, Brian Gottschalk, he just ran with it, and now he has a cadre of people along with him that really make that leadership program excellent. And so I'm really proud of what Brian was able to accomplish there. And again, when you have talented people around you, that really makes the job a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely right. And again, I've heard so many stories where an athletic director and coaches, of course, have started a leadership program or a captain's council or something along those lines, and it has been so impactful that the principal ends up, hey, we need this for our entire school. And you hear stories about trying to build culture at a school. When you have that, when you have a principal that recognizes the great things that the AD and the coaches are doing, that's when you really have a culture going. Great stuff.
Yeah.
Jeff, if one of our listeners, and we'll do this at the end of the podcast too, if one of our listeners wanted to reach out and pick your brain a little bit, and listeners, you've got someone who spent 40 years building a program, nurturing a program as a high school AD, and is still involved. Jeff, what's the best way that they can get a hold of you?
Probably email. I don't know if you want me to give my email address. Sure. It's JK and then Sitz, SITZ. So jksitz@gmail.com. And I'd be happy to, there's not much brain left to pick, But, I mean, if I can be helpful in any way, that would be, I certainly would be. So many people were great and helpful to me along the way. Certainly wouldn't be sitting here today if it hadn't been for the help of other people. So if I can be of help to you, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah. So that's jksitz@gmail.com. And again, we'll give that out at the end of the interview. For our NIAAA listeners, his information is also available on the NIAAA website in the member portal. Our guest is Jeff Sitz. We're going to take another break, but we're coming back with some more. So please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to thank Sideline Interactive for their support of the podcast. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and schedule a live web demo and see their indoor score tables and their video boards in action. One of the best purchases I ever made as an AD was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Just fantastic. Of course, we use it for home games, but we also use it for pep rallies, for signing ceremonies. Their products are tremendously versatile, and their customer service is just outstanding. Go to sidelineinteractive.com right now. Schedule that live web demo. That's sidelineinteractive.com. Welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. Jeff, you mentioned earlier that you're part of the national faculty for the LTI 706 course. And I know that's something that you're very passionate about. Share with our listeners a little bit about the importance of education-based athletics.
Yeah, I came to 706 a few years ago, and Rich Barton, who's now the executive and one of the associate executive directors at the NIAAA, had written the course along with several other people, Roy Turner and so on. And I'm now the chair for that course because Rich has had to move away from that because he has the national office and so on. And so we've been going around the country teaching 706 and teach it at the national every year. One of the things in there that has struck a chord with me, I guess, as we teach it, and it's a small portion of the course, but, we love to talk about education-based athletics, right? The NIAAA, that's kind of almost a tagline with them, is education-based athletics, and we're all proud of that, and we're all, heading in that same direction. One of the things that I found to be ironic is, as I move on, I was blessed to probably have a coaching staff that was still about 65% teachers in our building. But I know people in southeastern Wisconsin who have 0 teachers in their building who are on their coaching staff, and they may be at a much larger school than I was at. And so one of the things is, how do we take this concept or idea of being involved in education-based athletics and put that forward to a coaching staff who has no background in education-based athletics? I mean, they're coming out of the bleachers. They're coming to us from club programs. They're coming to us from all kinds of programs that are not education-based. They're athletic, but they're not education-based. And now we're saying to them, hey, look, you've got to fit into the philosophy that our school has. And here's my vision and the culture we're trying to develop at this school. And it has to fit into what we're doing as a school. You can't be renegade running out there doing whatever you want to do. And so when you're establishing as an athletic director your vision for the culture of your program, you've got to be intentional about hiring the right kind of people. And you've got to be intentional. One of the questions we always ask in 706, would you hire that coach to be your child's coach? Is that the person, is that the young man, is that the young woman that you want coaching your child? And if you can't answer yes to that, then you're taking a risk by hiring them. And we've all been in that situation, right, Jake, where you've got to hire a warm body because, whatever, track, softball, baseball, lacrosse starts on Tuesday and it's the Wednesday before and we're still looking for that assistant coach. So sometimes you're forced to hire just, a warm body. But for the most part, we have people coming to us and wanting to be involved in our programs. And I think that athletic directors sometimes miss the fact that we have to be intentional about presenting what is education-based athletics. What does that look like? How is that different from club? How is that different from mom and dad sitting in the stands and yelling at the officials? How is it different? What does it look like? And this is what it has to be. You can go back to being a club coach later, or you can go back to being a mom or dad or a screaming parent in the fan in the stands later. But when you're in our program, this is education-based athletics. We have a school to represent. We have a community to represent. We have a vision for how we want this to go for our kids, for our coaches, and we want you to be part of that. And we want you to grow that culture, and we want you to grow that vision. We don't want you to run around and have your own ideas. Certainly, everybody's going to have their own ideas within their program, as long as it continues to fit in that education-based piece. And I think that, that's something that athletic directors really need to be intentional about when they're hiring coaches, when they're establishing a program. When you're bringing somebody in who's not coming from a school setting, wow, you've got to spend a lot of time with them talking about what is education-based athletics and how does that work.
Yeah, I'm so glad you talked about that. And we cover several of those points in the 716 course, partnering with parents. And you're absolutely right. Now we have parents that are coming to us, and maybe their only sport experience is
Right.
in the club setting. And so, coaching the coaches, partnering with parents, that job of the athletic director has just grown so much over the years, and so many great resources that the NIAAA provides. Thanks so much for sharing that. Jeff, this has been really cool sitting down with you. Again, we crossed paths, at the Nationals, briefly, but this has been kind of fun. Looking forward to maybe having a cold beverage with you this December when you come down to Orlando for the National Conference. But we're not done yet. We always wrap up with the Athletic Director's Toolbox. And, you certainly know your way around the world of athletics. We're going to take our final break here from Athletic Surveys. And when we come back, we're going to find out what Jeff Sitz, a 40-year veteran, NIAAA past president, is going to put into his new Athletic Director Toolbox. So please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack for sponsoring the AD Toolbox segment. Athletic surveys are a quick, easy, and affordable way for you to collect comprehensive data about your athletic department. Athletic directors typically only hear back from that 2%, maybe a frustrated parent or a student athlete, and we need to hear back from them so we can affect positive changes. But we also need to hear back from the 98% that really love and support our program, and that's where Athletic Surveys comes in. They can create a custom survey for your school that will allow you to take the pulse of your parents and your student athletes. Go to athleticsurveys.com. Get started today. That's athleticsurveys.com. Well, it's that time of the podcast. We've been visiting today with, I'm going to go ahead and say it again, a legend of our profession, Jeff Sitz. He is currently the Associate Executive Director for the Wisconsin Athletic Director Association, but he was the athletic director at his high school, Wisconsin Lutheran, for 40 plus years, also an NIAAA past president. So I think he knows his way around the world of athletics. Right now, I'm going to challenge him to send out a brand new athletic director on their very first job, but I'm only going to let him put 3 things in that toolbox. Jeff, what 3 items are going to go into your new athletic director toolbox?
So, Jake, the first one is, I think, one that, when you're a brand new athletic director, when you're going for that job and you're maybe moving out of the world of coaching and into athletic directing, I think one of the things that scares me the most is I sit here in Wisconsin, and we have every year at our conference in November, we invite all the first-year athletic directors to come to the front of the room and introduce themselves. That line in Wisconsin is immense. I think this last year we had 75 or 80 new athletic directors come to the front of the room and introduce themselves. I mean, we have a big banquet hall, and they were stretched from one side of the room to the other. And, we only have 518 schools in the state of Wisconsin. So to have, 20% of them be brand new athletic directors, maybe 25%, whatever that. Math was never a strong point, as you can tell. But, to have that many new athletic directors in the room says that turnover remains incredibly high. And just got back from Indiana State Conference, where we had our Section 4-5 state exchange, similar situation there, and sharing with the people in the Midwest. It's the same, I think, all over the country. The turnover is incredible. When you're going to be that athletic director and you're going to take over, you first of all have to know what that job is. Where are you going to be required to be? How many hours are you going to be required to be there? And so your spouse, your family, if you've got kids, that's always a really, really challenging situation. I'm going to tell you one quick story, even though this isn't story time. When my wife was coaching varsity girls volleyball at our school, we had our son Eric, and he was about, I don't know, 18 months, 2 years old, whatever he was. And Karen would bring him to school and she would take him, and then one of the managers would cart him around school until they brought him in my office at the end of the day. One day, one of the girls came up to Karen with Eric in hand and said, "Mrs. Sitz, I don't think we should let Eric go in the locker room anymore. He's starting to look around." And Karen said, "Look, I'm not telling you to take Eric into the girls' locker room. I never have. You guys grab him and run off with him," and so on and so forth. And so, it's just like, what's your family life going to be like? And, Karen quit coaching pretty much after we started adopting our children, because it just got to be too much, because I was never around and she was coaching. So in the fall, she was never around, and then all the off-season stuff. I think you have to take into consideration your family, your spouse, your kids, and how that's going to fit into a job that just never ends. It's a 24/7, the logo never comes off. Whether you and your family are out for dinner someplace, or whether you're at a local establishment having a cold beverage, or whether you're in the grocery store shopping, the logo doesn't come off. And when you're in a community where athletics is really important, they're going to come up and share ideas and thoughts with you, whether you want them to or not. And so I think you need to be really aware of what the job is like, and don't be afraid to reach out to somebody who is an athletic director and say, "What's that job like?" Talk to the people in the school. If you've got to be the game manager for everything that happens at home, oh man, they make for long days and long years. I'm so thankful to my wife and my children for all the things that they've put up with. But I really think that you need to be realistic about that job and how it's going to mesh with your family, and make sure that everybody's on board. We love to have your talents, but we'd love to have them for more than a year or two before you decide this job's not for me and it's too much. Figure that out a little bit ahead of time. And I think that's one thing that I would say to brand new athletic directors is figure out a way to make it work in your life, with your family, with your kids, with your spouse, especially, because it is really, really challenging. I think that's the biggest thing that I can give you for a toolbox. Jake, you and I talked a little bit about organization. I just kind of laugh, because almost every one of your sponsors is somebody we're using at Wisconsin Lutheran High School, right? So we've got Gipper, and I've got a guy who's just fantastic, Josh Seeger, who's using Gipper, and every day there's something out on all the social media channels. And we were with Ticket Spicket, who was bought out by Hometown, and so we do them for our digital ticketing and Huddle and all those various things. They make life as an athletic director and as a coach for the coaches so much easier. And I would really recommend that you latch on to some of those, whether it's the sponsors here that we have. Obviously, you're going to push those today, and there are other companies out there, but find ways in which you can make that job a little bit more streamlined, a little easier. That was hard for me as an athletic director. I always wanted to be pencil and paper and kind of old school, and then on the computer. Well, then I can't find it on the computer, and so on and so forth. But you really need to take advantage of the technology that's out there, and make use of that and promote your program through those technologies that exist. Don't be the last guy to sign in on it. Be the first guy to get in on it, and be a leader. That I guess is something else that I would encourage you to be. And then finally, I think organizing. You got to be organized. You have to know what's going on every place. And again, there's software to do that. make good use of your coaches and other people in your faculty. That's one thing that I tried to do at Wisconsin Lutheran is, okay, we've got a large number of faculty people who aren't teaching, who aren't coaching. They're teaching and they're going home. And so, who might be interested in being the soccer announcer, and who might be interested in helping out with social media, and who might be interested in doing this, that, or the other thing, and bringing them into the fold, so to say. And then they were a lot less complaining when it came time to get the baseball team out of eighth hour because they had to go to a game. And well, I'm kind of invested in that program. So anyway, try to cultivate that within your school, I think, is another thing. And, you don't want people in your school to say, well, this is an athletic school and all we care about is athletics. You want them to embrace a successful athletic program, embrace a successful fine arts program, whatever it might be, and get behind it as a piece of what's going on in the school. You got to engage everybody. You make that janitor your best friend. You make the administrative assistants your best friend, and whoever's lining the fields and whoever's fixing the van and whatever, those are your best friends, because when they're happy, then life goes a lot easier. So I guess those would just be some things to think about.
Well, you probably saw me scribbling those down. Again, great advice. Coaches, school culture, yourself, taking care of your family. Appreciate you sharing all those. And again, listeners, this is coming from a 40+ year veteran as an athletic director. Jeff, thanks so much for sharing today. One more time, if one of our listeners wants to reach out and pick your brain just a little bit, what's the best way they can get a hold of you?
Sure, by email, probably jksitz, jksitz@gmail.com is my email address. I have another email address from my old school, Jake, but supposedly they're going to cut that off at some point. So I don't want to give that one out. That might not be in existence for too much longer.
Right. We'll stick with the jksitz@gmail.com. Thanks again.
Yep.
Jeff, again, this was great spending some time with you. All the best moving forward, with the Wisconsin Association, and looking forward to seeing you, as I said, in December when you come down for NADC.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Jake, thanks for being persistent and patient with me. You've been asking me for a long time, and I just kept, I just moved from one thing to another here at home and still trying to figure out, retirement. I had to look up the other day what a bonbon was, because now that I sit home and eat them all day, because I got nothing else to do, I just wanted to make sure I was doing it right. But yeah, thanks very much for having me. It's been a great experience, and thanks for all you do in helping athletic directors get to the next level. That's what it's about: learning, growing, developing leadership skills, and podcasts like this are just so helpful. All the tools that are available. So thanks for what you're doing.
Oh gosh, coming from you, I consider that very high praise. Thank you, sir.
But
For our listeners, we do this just about every day, and we upload the Zoom recordings to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We appreciate you listening. Come back next time for another great interview. And as I said, just about every day for new content on the Educational AD Podcast. We'll see you next time.